when you really look back at the Delphi Murders case, it just occupies this unique, chilling space in American true crime history.
It really does.
It's not just the absolute tragedy of losing Liberty German and Abigail Williams, two young girls, 14 and 13.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that the killer was caught on audio and on video, and yet the truth just remained hidden almost in plain sight for nearly 6 agonizing years.
It's such a study in contrast, isn't it? You have this small, close-knit rural community in Delphi, Indiana.
Right.
The kind of place where everyone felt safe, where a crime like this seems, impossible. And that entire sense of safety was just annihilated on February 13th, 2017.
And the person who delivered the ultimate piece of evidence against the killer
Was Libby German herself.
She was a hero, in the truest sense of the word. The girls were dropped off at the Delphi Historic Trails around 1:30 in the afternoon, just ready for a carefree day off school. By 5:30 p.m., they were reported missing. The search was immediate, it was frantic, and it all culminated in the worst possible discovery. Their bodies were found the next day, Valentine's Day, across Deer Creek, about half a mile from the Monon High Bridge.
And right there at the scene was this extraordinary, truly unprecedented evidence that changed everything.
Yeah.
A grainy photo of the suspect, the infamous bridge guy, or BG, and that 43-second audio clip from Libby's phone, that small snippet with that muffled but commanding voice saying, "Down the hill," became the sound of terror for millions.
So our mission today is to meticulously unpack the full narrative of this incredibly complex case. We're going to go from that initial chaotic investigation through all the years of suspects and dead ends right up to the administrative blunder that led to Richard Allen.
And the evidence, the forensic evidence, the confessions, the psychological battle that waged in that courtroom.
Exactly. We're looking at all the facts, the evidence, and the legal strategies that really define this case.
Yeah.
To really understand the scope of this loss, we have to start with the victims. These weren't just names in a case file. They were, vibrant young women walking into an absolute nightmare.
They were inseparable, the quintessential best friends. Abby Williams, she was known for being spunky, loved reading, played the saxophone, and had this really distinctive strawberry orange hair. And Libby German was the scholar, cheerful, very sweet, taking AP courses. She dreamed of being a veterinarian. They were just ordinary teenagers enjoying a day off school.
And Libby's older sister, Kelsey, she's the one who dropped them off.
Yeah.
Near County Road 300 North, around 1:30 p.m.
Yeah.
And that trail, the Monon High Bridge Trail, it's a piece of local history. An abandoned railroad bridge high over Deer Creek.
It was a place locals just took for granted, a safe spot for a hike.
And we have a precise timestamp for their final moments of peace, don't we?
We do. Libby was active on social media, and she posted a photo of Abby walking on the bridge at 2:07 p.m. So that becomes the marker, the last moment we know they were safe, just minutes before their encounter. And that bridge itself, it's long, it's precarious, it kind of forces you to commit to the path once you're on it.
So by February 15th, just 2 days later, law enforcement already has this crucial evidence from the phone. They circulate the still image of the suspect, the bridge guy, walking toward them, head down, hands jammed in his pockets.
Right, and that image immediately identifies a male subject as the prime suspect. It's stark, it's eerie.
And then came the decision on February 22nd to release the audio clip.
Which was an unprecedented move. That's not standard procedure, but the investigators were desperate.
Sure.
That muffled, chilling voice commanding them down the hill, it was confirmation of the imminent danger they faced. And authorities right away, they publicly hailed Libby as a hero for having the presence of mind to record it.
But strategically, they kept a really tight lid on other information. They cited the need to not compromise any future trial.
And that decision, that massive information vacuum, was immediately devastating for the community.
I can only imagine.
Well, it creates this paradox, right? You give the public the image and the voice, but you won't say how the girls died.
And that absence of facts just creates this toxic fear.
Exactly. Were they shot? Was it a stabbing? People didn't know the extent of the violence, and that mystery just fueled rampant and often really graphic online speculation.
Right. I remember those unconfirmed, lurid text messages that started leaking out, allegedly from someone involved in the rescue. Claims that Libby was found nude, Abby still dressed, bodies covered with sticks, claims of cut throats.
And that didn't just terrorize the community, it severely damaged the public's trust in law enforcement. It made people think the authorities were actively hiding the truth.
The trauma was just deep and immediate. I mean, you read accounts of this small town suddenly turning completely paranoid.
Everyone became a suspect. People started locking doors they hadn't locked in decades.
Carrying mace, pepper spray.
Right. The collective worst nightmare had become real. And that suspicion, that paranoia, it just hit social media like a tidal wave, pointing fingers at anyone who even remotely looked like that first sketch. And that intense fear is the backdrop for everything that happened over the next 5 years.
So the investigation in those early years, it really felt like a case of constantly shifting ground. Law enforcement seemed to be chasing a ghost. And the face of the killer changed so dramatically in the official press releases.
It did, and the evolution of those suspect sketches is one of the most frustrating parts of this for the public. On July 17, 2017, they released the first official composite sketch.
This was the old bridge guy?
Exactly. Based on eyewitness accounts, he looked like a man in his 40s or 50s, kind of heavy-set, wearing an old cap. It suggested a seasoned local, maybe a drifter.
And for 2 years, that was the face everyone was looking for. But then, on April 22, 2019, they just pull a complete 180.
A total reversal. Police announce a new direction, and they release a second sketch. And this man is radically different. Much younger, possibly in his 20s or 30s, clean-shaven, different kind of cap. The shift wasn't subtle at all. It implied they were looking for an entirely different person.
Or at least someone who could drastically alter their appearance.
Right. And investigators insisted, look closely at the second sketch, listen to the audio, pay attention to his gait. They specifically said they believed the suspect was familiar with Delphi and was likely hiding in plain sight.
But that contradictory information just led to so much frustration and, the common accusation that the police were just disorganized or had no credible leads.
It did. And during this whole chaotic period, they were, of course, pursuing several high-profile persons of interest. The first, and maybe the most immediate, was Ron Logan.
The man who owned the land where the girls' bodies were found.
The obvious first choice. Proximity and the fact that he matched the general description of that initial older bridge guy sketch.
And there was more to it than that, right? He had a history.
He did. A documented history of violence against women. One former partner went on record saying she was terrified of him, and she recounted an incident where he actually hit her over the head with a wrench.
And when police interviewed him, his alibi was just strange from the start.
Very strange. He claimed he was driving on a 3-hour tropical fish run to Lafayette with his cousin. But the cousin contradicted that story entirely.
And then the cell phone data.
Exactly. Cell phone tower data placed Logan's phone on or very near his property at the time he claimed to be somewhere else.
So that's highly suspicious.
Extremely. In March 2017, the FBI executed a search warrant on his property. Now, he was charged, and he served 4 years in prison for probation violations, drunk driving, but he was never charged with the murders. He passed away from COVID in 2020, leaving this big, lingering question mark.
And the public was really fixated on him for years.
For years. Another person who captured a lot of public interest was Keegan Kline, who used the fake online profile Anthony Shots.
Right, he was convicted of child exploitation. But the connection here was that he had been catfishing Libby German using that profile the night before the murders.
And that connection fueled this whole theory that the murders weren't random, that maybe the girls were specifically lured to the area to meet a predator. Kline vehemently denied any involvement in the murders, but his connection just provided this alternative narrative that really resonated with people's fears about online predation.
And we have to address the massive allegations of investigative failure that really haunted those 5 years. The sheer size of that crime scene, the inexperience of the local agencies, it presented huge challenges.
It's a sad reality, and it's been acknowledged even by people who were involved. A former task force member admitted, "We got the training after the murders."
Wow.
And there are multiple reports suggesting the crime scene wasn't immediately secured. It was allegedly compromised by volunteers and other people before specialized units arrived, which means crucial evidence could have been lost or mishandled right at the start.
And what's the ultimate implication of a compromised scene in a case like this?
It means you have a lack of usable, definitive forensic evidence. No DNA, no fingerprints, no trace evidence. The entire case becomes reliant on circumstantial factors, eyewitnesses, the victim's own recording, and, eventually the hope for a confession or some kind of major breakthrough. The foundation was just shaky from the get-go.
So for 5 years, you have confusion, shifting sketches, high-profile suspects. The case had essentially gone cold in the public eye. And the breakthrough that finally happened in September 2022 wasn't from, high-tech surveillance or a stunning confession.
No. It was, astonishingly, a clerical error being corrected.
Just unbelievable.
It's the ultimate administrative failure and success story all rolled into one. The critical turning point came from a volunteer file clerk named Kathy Shank. She was reviewing old files and she stumbled upon a tip from 2017 about a man named Richard Allen.
And his name had been recorded incorrectly.
Exactly. So the file was mislabeled as cleared and it just sat there untouched for years. The sheriff later admitted Allen had just fallen in the cracks of the investigation.
A misfiled piece of paper, that's what it came down to.
And this wasn't just some random person calling in a vague suspicion. Richard Allen had self-reported to an officer just 3 days after the murders, offering a voluntary statement.
Okay, let's break down that original 2017 statement, because in hindsight, it's just so damning. What did he tell them?
He placed himself right on the trails that day. He said he was there between 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. He claimed he was watching fish and checking stock tickers on his phone.
Right.
And crucially, he said he saw 3 girls pass by. So his presence, his own timeline, it corroborated key witness testimony that placed a man matching his description near that bridge during the critical window.
So now, jump forward 5 years to October 2022. Investigators pull out that forgotten tip. They go to interview Richard Allen again on October 13th.
And in that interview, Allen not only reiterates that he was there, but he provides these key confirmatory details. He admits he was wearing jeans and a black or blue jacket that day.
Which matches the general witness descriptions and the bridge guy image.
He confesses to being on the Monon High Bridge, walking the trail, seeing the group of girls. He puts himself in the place at the time, wearing the clothes.
I kept denying he was involved in the murders, though.
Oh, yeah. But during a follow-up interview on October 26th, the tension just peaked.
I haven't.
He continued to deny everything, but at the very end of the conversation with investigator Jerry Holman, Allen sort of reached a breaking point. He basically threw down a gauntlet and told Holman to arrest me if they thought he was guilty.
And Holman did.
Took him up on the offer. Allen was arrested immediately.
And when the probable cause affidavit was unsealed, it laid out this circumstantial web the state was going to use. What did those specific links reveal?
Okay, first, Allen's vehicle. A 2016 black Ford Focus. This matched the description of an oddly parked car seen near the trail entrance.
Right. And surveillance video from a local business, Hoosier Harvest Store, captured a vehicle matching that description at 1:27 p.m. heading toward the trail area.
Which lines up perfectly with Allen's own stated arrival time of 1:30.
Perfectly. Then there was a witness who saw him leaving the area.
Adding another layer to the timeline.
Yes, around 3:57 p.m., a witness saw a man matching Allen's description walking away from the bridge. And this man was described as muddy and bloody.
Muddy and bloody.
Which suggests he'd been in a struggle or a fight and was trying to get out of there quickly.
But the single most significant piece of information in that document, the absolute core of the physical evidence, was the unspent .40 caliber cartridge.
Found less than 2 feet from one of the victims' bodies, right between the 2 girls. The affidavit stated that forensic analysis had definitively matched this round to Richard Allen's Sig Sauer P226 handgun, which was recovered during the search of his home. That linked closed the gap between the suspect and the crime scene. Okay, so let's really unpack that forensic evidence, because this is where the case goes from circumstantial to, well, physical proof. That unspent .40 caliber cartridge became known as the magic bullet in the media.
Right, but we need to be precise about what it was and why it mattered so much.
Yeah, let's do that.
Absolutely. The distinction between a bullet and a cartridge is vital here. A bullet is just the projectile, the part that leaves the barrel.
Okay.
What was found was a full cartridge. That means it was intact. The shell casing, the gunpowder, the primer, and the bullet all together. Crucially, it was unfired, but it had these clear, identifiable marks on the brass casing.
So if the gun wasn't fired, how does an unfired cartridge end up ejected and lying there between the victims?
This is the critical technical detail. It happens in semi-automatic handguns like the Sig Sauer P226 they found in Allen's house through a process called racking the slide.
Racking the slide?
When you load a round into the chamber and then you manually pull the slide back, the gun's internal mechanics, specifically the extractor and the ejector, they pull that unfired cartridge out of the chamber and just throw it out.
And when those internal parts scrape against the soft brass casing of the cartridge, they leave behind unique tool marks.
Precisely. You should think of tool marks as the firearm's unique signature, its fingerprint. Every machine, even ones made identically, leaves microscopic, distinct markings. And the forensic examiner testified in court that they were able to match the quality and quantity of these marks on the shell casing from the scene to the chamber and slide of Richard Allen's Sig Sauer.
Wow, so the probability of that being a coincidence is what?
Essentially zero. This directly linked his gun, which Allen admitted he never loaned out or let anyone else use, to the geographical location of the murders.
So if the cartridge was the physical smoking gun, the video and audio were the psychological one. We finally got to see the full, stabilized 43-second video exhibit 246, which provided these chilling new details.
Oh, it did. The full video showed the girl's horrifying realization of the danger. Bridge Guy was much closer than anyone had previously assumed. He was literally right behind Abby as she's hurrying off the bridge.
You can see that they're terrified.
Visibly. Shaking, sniffling, yet they're trying to sound polite and casual, which is a known psychological response to try and de-escalate danger. Abby is even heard saying something like, "Don't leave me," to Libby.
And the audio enhancement, Exhibit 207, that solidified the human connection.
The enhancement allowed investigators to definitively identify the voice. A state police master trooper, who testified to having listened to over 700 of Allen's prison phone calls later on, identified the voice saying, "Down the hill," as Richard Allen's.
So that puts Allen's voice at the point of coercion.
Yes. And there was also critical testimony about why the girls complied, why they didn't just run.
Right, because that's a question everyone asks.
An investigator testified that one of the girls is heard mentioning a gun in the video right before the down the hill command. Furthermore, the mechanical sound of the gun being racked, that distinctive metallic click, is reportedly audible right after the word guys and before down the hill.
So he brandished the weapon.
It strongly suggests he didn't just command them. He brandished the weapon and used the sound of chambering around as an immediate, terrifying intimidation tactic to force them to comply.
And it tells you everything about the strength of this evidence that when the jury started deliberations, they asked to re-review 4 specific things: the enhanced audio, the stabilized video, and the videos of Richard Allen's 2 police interviews.
They weren't focused on the defense's theories. They were focused on connecting the man on that tape to the man in custody.
The state built this incredibly robust circumstantial case around that one piece of physical evidence.
You have Allen's own admission, he was there, the video placing Bridge Guy there, and the unspent cartridge linking the precise weapon, which Allen owned, to the scene. It's a closed loop of evidence.
But despite the strength of that physical evidence, the prosecution landed an absolute bombshell during trial prep. And that was the sheer volume of Richard Allen's confessions while he was incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecution claimed he confessed to the murders more than 60 times.
Yeah.
60.
That figure is just staggering, and it's highly unusual in any criminal case. These confessions weren't just one-offs, they were made to a whole range of people.
His wife, his mother.
His wife, his mother, other family members, prison staff, including the warden and the clinical psychologist who was treating him. They were delivered over phone calls, during in-person visits, and even in writing.
And the details of those confessions were just utterly horrifying. They cemented the brutality of the crime.
The psychologist testified that Allen confessed he had initially planned to sexually assault the victims, but claimed he ran away when he saw a van nearby, interrupting his plan.
All right.
He also confessed that he subsequently cut the girls' throats and covered their bodies with sticks. And these details, they matched those leaked, unconfirmed crime scene reports from way back in 2017.
Suggesting knowledge only the killer would have.
Exactly. But this is where the defense launched their fiercest counter-narrative. They attacked the validity of the confessions by focusing entirely on Allen's mental state and the conditions of his confinement.
They argued these were not true confessions.
No, they argued they were false statements generated under extreme duress. The defense pointed directly to the harsh conditions Richard Allen was kept under. Solitary confinement, a practice known to severely degrade mental health. And he was reportedly receiving psych medications, specifically Haldol injections, without what the defense claimed was informed consent. The argument was simple. The state psychologically broke him.
And to support this, they brought in their own high-level medical experts.
They did.
Yeah.
A neuropsychiatrist testified that Allen suffered from serious mental illnesses, including major depressive disorder, intense anxiety, and dependent personality disorder, all of it exacerbated by the high-stress, isolated environment.
And the expert's conclusion was that he had devolved into what?
Into true psychosis, that he experienced grave disability. The defense argued that a person in this psychotic, highly medicated, and stressed state could easily internalize suggestions and generate false confessions.
So this creates a direct, high-stakes battle for the jury, because the state countered with its own expert.
Exactly. The state psychologist rejected all the defense's claims of psychosis. Instead, they argued that Richard Allen was malingering,
Meaning he was faking it?
consciously faking or exaggerating his mental illness to appear disabled or to garner sympathy or undermine the evidence. So the jury was left to weigh two conflicting professional diagnoses. Is this a broken psychotic man or a calculating killer trying to manipulate the system?
And we know the jury was deeply invested in this conflict. 5 jurors specifically asked questions during deliberations about how to distinguish between genuine psychosis and malingering.
It just speaks to how difficult this topic is. The defense's goal was to introduce enough reasonable doubt to suggest that even 60 confessions coming from a man they claimed was in solitary and receiving forced medication were just unreliable.
This brings us to the most controversial and honestly legally strategic move by the defense, the introduction of the Odinist cult theory through what's called a Frank's motion.
A Frank's motion is a very serious legal maneuver. It's not just a request to suppress evidence, it's an active accusation that law enforcement lied or intentionally misled the judge to get a search warrant.
The warrant for Allen's home and his gun.
Correct. The defense used a 136-page document to outline their theory of third-party involvement.
And what was the core of that theory?
They alleged that the true killers were members of a pagan religion called Odinist, or Odinism, and that the girls were victims of a ritualistic sacrifice. They claimed the crime scene contained specific symbols linked to these rituals, like tree branches and sticks placed over Libby, who was found nude, forming Norse symbols or runes.
But why introduce this through a Frank's motion instead of just as a defense theory in court?
It was a strategic masterstroke, really, despite the gag order. The motion required them to file this detailed 136-page document, which immediately became public record.
So it gets their theory out there.
It allowed them to publicly disseminate their alternative theory, the ritual sacrifice, the alleged symbols, the names of specific individuals they claimed were Odinist knights, to create doubt in the public sphere, even though the judge ultimately ruled the theory was inadmissible in court. They even claimed Allen's confessions were coerced by prison guards who were Odinists and had threatened him.
So moving into the actual trial phase, Judge Francis Gull's rulings really shaped what the jury was allowed to hear. And it set the stage for what a lot of legal analysts believed would be an inevitable appeal.
Oh, definitely. Judge Gull maintained very tight control over the proceedings. She focused the trial narrowly on the evidence directly related to Richard Allen, and she made several crucial rulings that constrained the defense's ability to argue alternative theories.
The first big one was banning the third-party culprit defense,
which was a huge blow to the defense. Judge Gull stated explicitly that the defense had failed to provide admissible evidence placing other suspects, whether it was Ron Logan or the named Odinist individuals, at the scene of the crime.
You can't just point a finger.
Legally, no. You can't just point a finger at a third party without offering concrete evidence that directly links that person to the time, place, and means of the crime.
And they were also barred from referencing geofencing data, which the defense argued showed other phones were near the crime scene.
Exactly. And when a judge prohibits a defense strategy like that, the defense immediately argues they're being prevented from presenting a complete defense, which is a fundamental right. That action alone provides strong grounds for a future appeal, no matter the verdict.
We also heard the defense make these serious, though unproven in court, claims that the sheriff had intentionally concealed evidence and lied to get the search warrant for Allen's home.
Major accusations attacking the foundational integrity of the whole investigation. But the judge's strictness meant the trial had to remain hyper-focused on the prosecution's core theory. Richard Allen, his gun, his presence, and his voice.
The trial began on October 18th, 2024, and it ran for 17 days. Prosecutors had to reveal these specific, agonizing details about the crime, including that both girls had their throats cut. And then they meticulously presented the technical evidence of the gun match.
The prosecution's closing argument was simple. The video and the unspent bullet are irrefutable. They presented the testimony confirming Allen's voice on the recording and the multiple confessions, even if they were contested. They argued the physical facts spoke louder than any claims of mental illness.
The defense, on the other hand, they staked everything on that mental health defense. They claimed the man who confessed 60 times was psychologically damaged and coerced.
It was a desperate, but really a necessary strategy for them. If they couldn't overturn the physical evidence, they had to argue that the man linked to that evidence wasn't psychologically culpable for his own subsequent statements. They were trying to inject reasonable doubt.
The jury was sequestered for deliberations starting on November 7th, and as we noted, their focused review on the video, the audio, and Allen's interviews suggested they were seeking absolute certainty.
And on November 11th, 2024, the jury delivered the verdict. Richard Allen was found guilty on all 4 counts, 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of felony murder.
The fact that the verdict came after such intense focus on that primary evidence suggests they were satisfied with the forensic link and the voice ID. They dismissed the coercion and psychosis arguments.
It seems so. Sentencing followed swiftly on December 20th, 2024.
And Judge Gull imposed the maximum sentence.
The maximum allowed under Indiana law. She made sure the sentences were consecutive. 65 years for Libby German and 65 years for Abigail Williams, for a total of 130 years in prison. He's currently serving his time, achieving the maximum legal closure possible for the families.
For the community of Delphi, the arrest and conviction of Richard Allen, it finally closed this horrific 7-year chapter that was just defined by terror and suspicion and global scrutiny.
The relief was palpable, you could feel it, but it was also tinged with that profound grief that never really goes away.
7 years is just an agonizing amount of time to wait for accountability, especially in a small town where the killer was literally a neighbor.
The feeling of justice being served was immense, but the scars left by the paranoia and the loss, those are permanent. The community had to find ways to cope, to transform their sorrow into something positive.
And that is exactly what the families did. Despite the tragedy, the legacy of Abby and Libby has been channeled into this powerful, enduring, positive action.
The L&A Park Foundation.
Right.
The foundation is dedicated to commemorating their lives and creating spaces for appreciation of nature, art, play, and athleticism. And this led to the development of the Abby and Libby Memorial Park, a huge sports complex just a mile north of Delphi.
And that project became this massive community undertaking. It received grants, immense local support. It really showed the town's resilience in turning tragedy into a positive shared resource.
And the girls' former school also ensured their legacy would endure academically. The library at Delphi Community Middle School was renamed the Abby and Libby Memorial Library.
And then, perhaps most movingly, there's the enduring symbol of the orange lights.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Many homeowners across central Indiana, following a request from Libby's mother back in 2017, installed orange lights on their front porches.
And initially, that was a beacon for the search for the killer.
It was. But now, the orange lights continue to burn year-round as this quiet, constant commemoration of the girls and their light.
But beneath all that resilience, the personal grief just remains overwhelming. Libby's grandmother spoke so movingly about the profound loss, having to grapple with the knowledge that her granddaughter's last act, her heroism, ultimately solved her own murder.
And the trauma extended far beyond the immediate families. You hear accounts from former friends and acquaintances who felt like they had to move away from Delphi just to escape the constant, crushing reminder of what happened there.
Yeah.
One friend recalled that every time the weather turns cold or snowy, she's instantly transported back to that February day the tragedy occurred. It just shows how deeply the trauma permeated the local landscape and the collective psyche.
So looking back at this extraordinary case, from Libby's resourcefulness in capturing the bridge guy on video to Richard Allen's 130-year sentence, the prosecution's success really hinged on connecting those undeniable pillars of evidence.
It did. Allen placed himself at the scene, his gun matched the unspent cartridge found between the victims, and his voice was identified commanding the girls down the hill.
Yet the full narrative remains so complex because those facts are interwoven with these significant countervailing arguments. The administrative failures that left Allen untouched for 5 years.
The compromised crime scene that yielded almost no DNA evidence, and the defense's really compelling claims of severe mental duress and psychosis, influencing those 60-plus confessions.
The jury reached a definitive legal conclusion, and that brought closure for the families. However, all those legal maneuverings, the Franks motion, the disallowed defenses, the claims of police misconduct, they were all strategically designed by the defense to raise public doubt, even if they were inadmissible in court.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought to consider and a nuance that will fuel analysis of this case for decades to come. Richard Allen was convicted on highly compelling physical evidence, but given the defense's successful effort to raise public awareness of the alleged investigative missteps and the claims of severe mental duress during confinement, how will the public perception of justice served be influenced? If the conviction stands, the question remains. Was this purely a triumph of forensic science, or was it a conviction built upon highly contested psychological evidence, ensuring that the complexities of the Delphi case will continue to be discussed and debated?